Everyone, welcome back to another podcast. This is What's Next with We. This is part of the SaaS series. We have a really special guest today, Sethu. Hi, Sethu. Welcome to What's Next with We.
Nice to be here. We.
Thanks. Sethu is a co-founder of Zluri, a SaaS platform to manage other SaaS platforms. Series A funded startup. They just raised 10 million recently this year. Definitely get to know more from him on this interesting platform that for the first time for my knowledge, I'm seeing such a platform. So it'd be great to hear from him. Just a quick overview of the flow of today's podcast. We're going to hear Sethu speak about his journey so far as obviously working at startups to starting out his own at Zluri. Then getting his view on India being a SaaS hub, followed by overview of Zluri and its use cases and some success stories that they have done so far. And finally, the theme of the podcast, what's next in the SaaS management space. I'm Vishal Ramaswamy, the V in What's Next with We, your host as always. Sethu, once again, welcome to my podcast.
Thank you, Vishal. Nice to be here.
Great. Sethu, jumping on directly to my first question, would be great to hear your story so far. I think initially conventional story of engineering, MBA, worked at a few companies, and then starting out. So it'd be great to hear how the entrepreneurial bug, if you may say, had kind of bitten you. When did that happen? Did you get trained to be an entrepreneur, or did it just come naturally by maybe identifying a problem? So it'd be good to know your story till now, Sethu.
Sure, Vishal. So again, so nobody is born saying that I'll be an entrepreneur someday, right? I think being brought up in a typical Indian middle class upbringing, I always say this: parents bring us up to be good employees, never to be
True.
good creators ever.
True.
Right? I don't think never planned to be an entrepreneur, right? But I think when I started to work, what I really loved about work was problem solving. And I think that's what entrepreneurship is all about, right? Solving different problems across product, sales, marketing, GDM, company building, people process, and all of that, right? And it's a different problem every day. And I think if you're not someone who loves to solve problems, you rather better off be at jobs because you deal with limited amount of problems which you can manage. And entrepreneurship is more about managing a lot of problems every day. That's what gets you to work, which might otherwise put other people off, right? So I kind of like that. But again, you cannot start up just because you want to start, right? It's not like going out and buying something because you want it. It's just not that way. And this is a very, very long-term game, right? Which means you never know what's going to come your way on day one or day 1,000, right? So you got to be prepared for everything in that sense. So then why you start becomes more important than sometimes even what you're going to solve for, right? So it was very, very clear. I think again, going through the typical, but only thing I think is I worked on a previous startup, joined as employee number 12. And the revenue was probably less than $100,000 when I had joined. And we grew to multi-million dollars in ARR across 40 different countries. And I was last in my assignment in Singapore. So what I had the privilege was to see the founders of the previous startup building it. And I was part of the founding team eventually. So which means I'd seen it firsthand of the dirty exercise of company building, right? So a lot of people after that quit and say, I'm not going to start a company anymore. And that's not for me. But some people say, yeah, I believe I can do it. So I think Ritesh, Chait and I fall in second category. So all three of us had seen the company. So Chaitanya was, I think, employee number 6 or something. Ritesh was employee number 11 and I was employee number 12. So all of us had joined in just for the rush of it, but we didn't have what it takes to be an entrepreneur. So we joined the next safer bet of joining a very early startup. And sort of becoming the founding team eventually, right? So then, so that's always been with us, right? So it's not like, and I don't think very, very few people jump from an extremely large organization into being an entrepreneur, right? But most transitions have to happen in the right manner. It's like lane changing on the road, right? You just can't go from lane 1 to 4. You got to go 2, 3, 4. So for me, it was a big company, public listed companies, then a sort of 1,000 employee company, then 11 employee company, right? Then I had to start my own. So it was a nice progression, and that's something I really loved. And a couple of things worked well in our way. Number one is actually we found a problem that has long legs and will only, the market for it will only grow trillions of dollars, right?
True.
So classically saying that, I think the way I say it is, we had the era of industrialization, computerization, internetization. And the next era that we're entering is a softwareization that's going to be having another 2 to 3 decades at least in terms of growth, right? And enterprise software is 20% CAGR, and which is, even with how much all the recession and fear around the world, enterprise software is sort of shielded, and we all know
Absolutely.
it.
True.
And all of that is also transitioning into SaaS, and which means a system to manage all this will become a necessity. The question is whether Zluri has a chance or not, right? That's all. So the problem is very clear. And I think having Ritesh and Chait like co-founders couldn't have asked for a better founding team. So when everything was aligning, then why not? So it was relatively, in hindsight, I can say it was easier. But I think to get all of that together as aligned as one star, I think I got lucky.
Yeah, very interesting story, Sethu. I think, as they say, right, once the stars get aligned, things get much easier. And I think your journey has been, as you said, changing lanes from working in a large company to a mid-sized company to a startup, and then finally starting out. So I think you would have got great perspectives from each and every, opportunity you got. And that eventually helps you being an entrepreneur, because I think problem solving is very required in all stages of a company, but typically very important in a startup, because where you own problems and you have to solve it, because you can't give it to somebody else. So I think a very interesting story, Sethu, and good part is you have found a really solid problem to solve. And I think an important point that you said, it's why are you building the startup more important than anything else, right? I mean, the reason you need to find just should be really strong. Otherwise, at some point in time, that passion, the enthusiasm might die down. So coming to my next question, I think you've laid the foundation of your story, and you have seen being at different organizations, you have kind of seen the Indian markets, seen the global markets. Just wanted to get your view on India being the global SaaS hub. I think a lot of people are talking about India going to touch 30 or 40 odd billion by 2025, by 2030, 100 odd billion of revenues by SaaS companies in India. Wanted to get your thoughts on, one is building in India, obviously understanding the problem, building in India, and building those solutions for the world. Do you think India could be the global SaaS hub?
Absolutely right. I think the way I tell it is sometimes actions are far more realistic than intent, right? So I'm building Zluri in India, right, for the world market today, right? So which obviously tells you that I'm pretty much betting long about Indian SaaS, right? Very, very simple, right? Because by the way, while starting Zluri, I was in Singapore, so I could have chosen to be there.
Absolutely, exactly.
Right? Could have tried to build from there, remote building.
Yep.
But I realized unless and until you're in the place of action, you really can't build something meaningful. That's why I moved here. And one of the reasons for it is extremely long-term believer in the prospect of this nation overall, and fundamentally SaaS being an important lever in that future growth, right? Two reasons I see why this is bound to happen inevitably. Number one, business models continuously change globally. For that to happen, the right pool of talent is important. Otherwise, what happens is the change will happen globally, but as a country, the country might not even be able to catch up because there's no talent, right? But the good thing is today, world is moving towards SaaS model of consuming software, because SaaS has fundamentally made software better, faster, cheaper, just like e-commerce made commerce better, faster, cheaper. All said and done, this is not going to go away now. Right? People have gotten so used to it. So that's a macro change, right? Well, that's inevitable. Right. The question is, what's India's chances in this, right? The fundamental thing about working in a SaaS company and delivering it for the world requires multiple skill sets, such as product management, product design, product marketing, a very important part on the GTM around sales, customer success, and all of that, right? And I think today, India has got the GTM part sorted, thanks to the Infosys, Wipro, Cognizant of the world, which had made the talent, right? Which means like I told you, the lane shift, right? We're already on lane 1 to sort of, because of that talent already. We understand technology intuitively. We understand how to service global customers from India intuitively, which means now all that is, it's not going to be service anymore, it's product, right? That's only learning that we have to take up as a nation. And I think we're pretty much sorted, at least from a GTM side, right? On the product side, I think always people have moved out of India to work for product companies. Now it's an opportunity for them to stay in India to work for these product companies at pretty good global pay, right? And it's not stopping
Absolutely.
them.
Yep,
Right?
absolutely.
So all of that is also adding to our advantages, right? Probably the only disadvantage, the whole scheme of things, I think, is product marketing of anything, because I don't think we've been great marketeers as a nation all throughout. But if you're able to fix that, then I think there's no stopping. And I think that's why the acceleration, Michelle, you said about 30, 40 billion to 100 will happen there, because we'll have all that talent built within, right? And another important point, I think what's also happening is everybody in the ecosystem, right, including the government, including the entrepreneurs, including the large organizations, have started believing in that now, which means right from the educational institutions they're trying to build talent for SaaS, right? Earlier, 20 years ago, it was like, hey, let's build this talent for IT and IT services, right? But now people are cognizant of the fact, let's build that for SaaS talent, which means eventually they'll also get bridged. And all of this comes together, then I think it's bound to be a success for us. And if you lose it even after that, I don't know. But I think everything looks good so far. Like I mentioned, the stars are aligning for this country. Let's just see where we go together.
I'm with you on that, Sethu. I'm also a strong believer, whatever I'm seeing, and through my podcast as well, I'm meeting some really innovative solutions along with an amazing team that's behind it, right? I think end of the day, as you mentioned, it's like pieces of a puzzle. You need to have product management, product design, product marketing, which you said, obviously India needs to improve. And the other side, customer facing roles like your GTM, customer success. I think most of the puzzle is in place already in India. We've already had successful SaaS companies from India making a mark globally. I think that creates a ripple effect, right? You have these founders who have kind of trained employees and who kind of want to start their own, create their own mafias, right? I think you have your Zoho mafia, Freshworks mafia, as they say. I think this is going to exponentially grow is what I feel. And I think you also touched upon an important bit that initially it was IT that institutions, government were working to create IT talent, services talent, and now it's more towards product talent. And you see a lot of groups, a lot of communities being built on product. So I think if we have the product mindset, talent in any of the startups, I think bound to grow exponentially. And I think, as you mentioned, the product marketing fit, the product marketing that you mentioned, I think that will get improved as we have more success stories from India. So Sethu, moving on to my next part of the podcast is obviously understanding what you guys do at Zluri. It's a SaaS for SaaS. I'm sure listeners out here will be like, hey, what the hell is this? So would be good to hear what Zluri does, couple of use cases, most important use cases, some success stories, and maybe taking it from the previous question, what are you guys doing differently on the product marketing side?
Sure. So simply put, the problem you're solving is every company is today using a ton of software to build their own business, right? And that's obvious. I mean, just funny part I said is when Zluri was 10 employees, we were using almost 30 SaaS tools. Wow. I jokingly tell my co-founders that if you're looking at this whole words like the Harvard, I think Christensen coined, getting the job done, right? If that's the famous thing, right? If you're looking at it, then I think we're employing more smarter than human beings, right?
True.
And it's funny because those jobs could have never been done better by humans because they were mundane, boring jobs. And this line of thinking is increasingly coming with all companies out there, right? To give you some facts out here, we have seen within Zluri's customer base, a 500 employee company uses 350 paid software. Right? Wow. It's massive. And is that number going to go down as they become bigger? The answer is no. So when a new function gets created within a company, the first thing they do is buy 10 new software to run their own function. So more number of functions, more number of growth, then this is bound to happen.
Correct. Right.
And today, if you ask somebody in the IT or the finance function, they have no clue about all of this, right? So then we say, hey, how about a platform like Zluri? that's going to magically pull in all of the software companies using and automatically reconcile the spend. And more than that, helps you with optimizing up to 30% of your software spend. People are like, wow, is that for real, right? So basically what's happened in this current macro scenario, Vishal, in the current scheme of things, is we are seeing a big uptick in the inquiries coming to trying to use Zluri now, because this just solves a problem for them, right? And combine this with automation. Another problem today is employees joining the company. To add them to the 10 tools that you need to be productive, companies take up to a week, right? Because they don't know who the owner of this application is, who should they ask to. By then, employee says, okay, I want to Figma, I want Slack, Google Workspace to whatever, right? Marketing tools, HubSpot to Salesforce. Man, it's such a cumbersome process, and nobody enjoys doing this. Trust me.
Correct, right.
So what happens is it's a huge loss of productivity for the person doing this job and the person wanting access to these tools to get the job done, right? And think of 1,000 employee company, people coming and leaving every single day. This just compounds to a very large problem. Within Zluri, you can automate that on a single click. So access management to all employees during onboarding and offboarding on a single click. That's what we've done it. So put all of this together, eventually where we're heading to is we're sort of becoming the operating system for all things software in your own company, right? From discovery to management, optimization, automation, right? So that's broadly what Zluri does. And because of the power of the platform that we have built, and we process close to now $1 billion in SaaS spend, by the way, that's what the platform is processing already. We exactly know what's the right price to pay for software, who's overpaying, who's underpaying, etc., and all of that. So through that, we also give software procurement services, or that we call as SaaS buying services, where we help you reduce the total cost of ownership even further. So putting these together, think of the entire nightmare and headache of managing software, just give it to somebody that's sleep at peace. So the funny thing I tell most of my customers is just work with us and get a couple of hours of extra sleep in a day, right? And that's worth paying for.
Absolutely.
So that's what we've done. And today's Zluri works with about 150 plus customers globally across 18 countries. And we are a product for all companies of all sizes. But I think we work really, well when the company is at about 250 employees or more, generally, because that's when the problem starts to bite them harder on all sides. They would want to look for a solution. So that's been our journey. We have some amazing investors on our cap table, in the form of India Partners, Kalari Capital, and Mass Mutual Ventures. All of them will be together. And Zluri is about 80 people strong today.
Wow, Sethu, really impressive. I think the problem that you have identified, I'm sure most companies, most listeners on this podcast would kind of also understand the level of cumbersome, and in terms of the effort that the maybe IT admin or the finance team have to take once employee joins the company, once a person leaves. I think a single dashboard to discover, I think, manage and optimize, I think, is a big value add for companies small in size. I think, as you said, 250 members plus. Having said that, I was just curious to find out also, does Zluri also help in identifying the right SaaS tools? Do you guys maybe also negotiate with the SaaS provider for maybe a bulk discount? Can you do all that at the Zluri platform?
Yes, absolutely, right. So that's that's sort of a model we built on top of a platform. So because customers said, you're already helping me with all of this, and you guys know my ecosystem better than anyone else out there, so more than even me, who's heading IT. So can you help me streamline this as well? And also, if you see, Vishal, what happens is 300 software they use, 300 vendors to manage.
True.
That boils down to almost 20 to 30 vendors on average a month. Then it comes out to every day you have something to deal with, and nobody enjoys that process, right? It's better taken than given to some experts. So that's exactly what we help customers do as well. We help procure software on their behalf. We help them negotiate and also get the security, finance, and legal approvals along the way internally, which means even the headache of talking to different teams getting it done is not there for IT or finance. So we take care of that as well.
Got it. So just curious, who would be your end buyer in typically 250 plus employees? Is it going to be the IT admin, or is it going to be finance, or is it going to be a cross-functional team that's going to approve a software like Zluri?
It starts with IT for us because end of the day, they also deeply care, because at the end of the day, to make the Zluri platform work, you need authorization out of your other tools, right?
True.
They have to authorize, which means you have to work with IT. So we're true to IT. And our auxiliary users of Zluri's platform are generally coming from finance, procurement, and HR as well for the onboarding and offboarding part, right? So that's the overall users using it. In some cases, just IT signs it off. In some cases, IT and finance together sign it off. In some cases, IT and procurement signs it off. It varies depending on company's process.
Understood, Sethu. So to my listeners out there, if you're looking for a dashboard that can help you manage all your SaaS softwares in one, I think you can reach out to Sethu. Sethu, moving on to my last question and basically the theme of my podcast, what's next? So I think you're solving the problems that we're seeing right now in companies. Have you guys thought of what's going to be how does the future look like in 3-5 years? I'm sure there's going to be exponential increase in SaaS softwares. There's going to be more complexities. How do you guys look at it? And is Zluri kind of prepared for taking on the future? So just want to get your views here.
Sure. So the way I see this, Vishal, is broadly, think of it like this, right? I think, so we built Zluri on global thing that won't change. So I think one of the mistakes founders make is they build for the theme for that year or something, right? For the excitement. I say sometimes starting company in your mid-30s helps. You're very grounded, right?
True, very true.
It's not, and you've had 12, 13 years of experience behind
Correct.
you. So kind of a thing. So we build Zluri based on things that won't change. And what are those, right? The world is increasingly going to use more software, which means that existing market is going to grow bigger. And number two, it's going to grow bigger the SaaS way, not the old install.exe file way. And third is a 5,000 employee company now has 5,000 buyers. Earlier, a 5,000 employee company had just 2 buyers, head of IT and head of finance, right?
True, very true.
And now this 5,000 buyers, if you remove the democratization from them, do you think they'll be happy? Of course, no, right? Because the Gen Z talent getting into the workspace now want the tools to be more productive, the hybrid work, etc. So part of the money that went to real estate now going to software, right? All of these things won't change, right? Irrespective of what happens to the world.
Right.
And we realized this 2.5 years ago. Right? That's how we started Zluri, that first place. And this won't change, right? So when he's asked what's next with me, right? I want to start with saying what's next one won't change. And because as founders, we cannot control things that changes beyond us, right? It's extremely difficult. So building a company based on changes is probably not the wisest thing to do. But building a company based on things, what it won't change is the wisest thing to do because it's completely under your control, right? So based on all of these 3 macroeconomic things that we believe strongly won't change at all, right? Irrespective of what happens. Now what's for surety, right? Then you know that enterprise software is $1 trillion. Eventually it'll become $2 trillion, which is almost, I tell this internally to my teams, right? If enterprise software spend was considered a country, it's probably the 6th largest country out there, right? And somebody has to manage and govern that, right? That's going to be a platform such as Zluri, right? And that's where we're heading to. So the way I tell it is to everybody, I think you cannot really control the outcome in anything you do, definitely not entrepreneurship, right? So the question is, can we become that platform to manage $2 trillion in software spend by 2027, 2028? That's the verdict we need to wait and watch out for, and let's execute towards that, right? So that's what I strongly believe it's there, which also means that there is enough room for more players also, right? That's why sometimes we say there's competition in our space. Hey, yes, but I honestly, hand to heart, think that competition is still less. It's going to be more players coming in because nobody wants to leave a $2 trillion pie out there, right? So eventually it's all going to happen. So let's get ourselves to be a great company with a great product that just gets better over time. And another thing also I tell it is do the hard things first. So do stuff that compounds over time. So to give you a stat, I think for a company of our size, we processed 90 terabytes of data just last month. 90 terabytes. And people hear like, whoa, right? Because the meta layer, and I strongly believe that the day is not too far when we'll probably process 1,000 terabytes of data in one day. And it's all going to come there. And to process that much amount of volume of data and still give like what I told you, discovery, management, optimization, automation. Imagine it's very hard for anybody to come closer to that. And that's where we're heading to. And that's where we strongly see our future as. And the whole, macroeconomic scenario that I just spoke to you about will augment our plan and growth for that.
Awesome, Sethu. I think interesting times ahead. I think one thing that maybe founders who are listening to this podcast could learn from is, I think, Sethu, you touched upon a very interesting topic on what's not going to change. And if you understand that and you have that under control, you're definitely building for the future. And if you can predict that change is not going to happen in the years to come, I think you're really building a product for the future. You can obviously allocate resources, plan your company ahead. And obviously, as the market, as you said, is huge, $2 trillion, as you mentioned. And other players coming in, actually, if competitors come in your space, I think you'll get better, right? I think generally 2 or 3 players in a particular space gives each other to do much better work than what they used to do before. So, Sethu, any last maybe thoughts on to founders who are listening to this, early stage founders building SaaS, some maybe 2 or 3 points you think that they should keep in mind building from India?
So definitely one is build your company based on what things won't change. I can't stress this enough. I think that's been true to since the time we started Zluri, right? Number 2 is do stuff that compounds over time. To give you a classic case, Vishal, is I think we believe that this marketing education, right? Today, people can understand what we say because we've been in this journey for a while now, right? But when we initially started, people didn't get what we were saying, right? So we wrote a lot of content. We educated the market, right? Obviously, there's no readers for it back then. But what we realized is over time, when people wanted to read about this space, they came on to Zluri's page. Not necessarily they became our customers, but they came, right? So that was very, very hard to do. But what we realized is, in hindsight, it was compounding over time. And today that gives us a good positioning on the internet, right? Saying that if it's anything about SaaS management, Zluri is an authority to say something about it, right? Been hard, but I think that brings me to the important point of do hard stuff first and do stuff that compounds over time. But don't take the easy route at all, right? So, and third, I think never been a better time to be an entrepreneur from India. I think finally, so when I was part of the earliest startup, it was funny, it's a story for another day, right? Which is that time Flipkart never happened. Meaning the funding of Flipkart never happened. Flipkart was the watershed moment in the Indian startup ecosystem, right? 2015.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
2013 and 12, when I worked in the previous startup was never heard of, right? You're pretty much okay with TCS, Infosys, kind of a jobs and some consulting, and that's where life was, right?
Correct.
And even getting married for at least me and Chai was difficult back in the day, right? Because in startups, we couldn't get married because it was very difficult. The story for another, like I mentioned to you, a lot of funny stuff happened, but we stayed the ground. But today, startups are seen as the next big thing, and people take pride in it, right? And your family is rooting for you, right? And there's so much support ecosystem today, which you would have never had 10 years before. So I think building in India for Indian entrepreneurs gets you that. Parents, spouses, that ecosystem, you can live probably in extreme frugality until you hit that PMF, then go for funding, right? All of that is a huge a benefit, as I see, being out of India today than anywhere else in the world. So just capitalize on it and start building on it. Yeah.
Awesome, Sethu. I think same those points that you mentioned. I think for a SaaS founder listening to this, I think those 3 points Sethu mentioned on things that don't change, the ecosystem being built, and I think no better time to build in India as now. Sethu, on that note, once again, thank you for taking out time on a Saturday to speak with me on this podcast. Sethu, once again, welcome, and thank you once again for being part of this.
Thank you, Vishal. I enjoyed the conversation.